Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's keep week 28 going with today's Tolkien Tuesday. Now, this series we've been looking at the revised and expanded edition of Tolkien's Letters, edited by Humphrey Carpenter and Christopher Tolkien. It's time to keep going as I share and discuss some of the new content found only in this new edition of the volume. Now, last week we looked at letters that Tolkien wrote to his sons. Not surprisingly, many of the new letters, some 40% of them, are letters to his family, so we'll often see those. Today, though, I want to switch gears a bit and at least look at some of the letters about publication. In this case, new letters or letters with new content from 1937 surrounding the publication of The Hobbit. And I'm going to start with letter 11b to Charles Firth at Allen and Unwin, likely dated in early to mid-March 1937. Tolkien had received proofs of The Hobbit near the end of February, along with a request that any changes be made with words taking up the same amount of space. That's a challenge that modern authors no longer have to deal with, but one that was a genuine problem for Tolkien in the days when books were manually typeset. So Tolkien is sending back not only the corrected proofs, but also rough prints of the end papers, including Thror's map. He writes, "The typesetting throughout was guilty of very few divergences from copy, and in general, proof corrections are light, but I ought to have given the manuscript a revision. In places, there were considerable confusions of narrative and geography. About 16 pages have suffered severely. I have calculated the space line by line as carefully as possible, and I hope made all corrections plain and intelligible. A revise of some of the chief alterations, a list as given on outside of returned proofs, might be advisable." Now, I've just written a book. I got to tell you, I can't imagine having to make changes to 16 pages of the text while making sure those changes all fit within the same number of words so as not to cause the surrounding pages to need to have their type reset. Tolkien goes on to ask if they've decided when they're planning on publishing, noting that if they're looking to publish it soon, he would endeavor to do something about the jacket at once, though I doubt my ability to produce anything passable. Professor Tolkien's continual self-deprecation. Now, by the time we get to the next new letter, it's September 17th, 1937, and The Hobbit is just 1 month away from publication. Tolkien had just received a letter from Sir Stanley Unwin, along with an advance of £25 on his royalties. That doesn't sound like a lot, but according to the Bank of England's inflation calculator, £25 in 1937 is roughly equivalent to £1,400 today, about $1,800 US. Tolkien was grateful, and he writes, "Thank you very much. The check was both surprising and comes at a very convenient moment indeed. I only hope The Hobbit will earn it and quickly put me out of your debt, though not out of gratefulness. I've been plagued with various worries, domestic and other, now straightening out, or I would have written before." I love that. Now, though, I want to go to a letter that Tolkien wrote to Sir Stanley Unwin, but not to the parts in the letter about publishing. This is letter number 17. It's dated October 15th, and there's only a single new paragraph in it in this revised and expanded edition, but it's such a charming little paragraph that I had to share it with you. So, you see, Unwin had sent Tolkien a letter from the author Richard Hughes. He had recently read The Hobbit and given it great praise with one, it's not really a caveat, but something like that. He said that some parents might, quote, be afraid that certain parts of it would be too terrifying for bedside reading. Like, I don't know, goblin songs about burning flesh and popping eyeballs? Maybe. Here's the thing, though. Hughes didn't have a problem reading it to his own son. He noted that children seem mostly to have a natural capacity for terror, which you can't do much about. I mean, if you don't give them dragons to be frightened at, they will frighten themselves with an old chest of drawers. Now, with that as context, let's go to the new paragraph. "Curiously enough, chests of drawers have also given me trouble. I still think them rather ominous. My daughter, Priscilla, aged 8, has long distinguished between literary and actual terrors. She can take any amount of dragon and a reasonable dose of goblin, but we recently had to change all the handles on the chest of drawers in her room because the former handles grinned at her, even in the dark. Not the subject matter, but the time is the real mistake. Bedtime is usually a foolish parental indulgence. Popular, of course, because so many of the young folk will do anything to postpone the fatal moment. But as far as I can see, arithmetic is quite as likely to produce disordered sleep as dragons, if administered or self-administered too late. Indeed, I can tell you, I've had more nightmares about algebra than I have had about dragons. Folks, this wraps up this week's Tolkien Tuesday. Be sure to join me again next week, though, as we keep diving into this treasure trove. Visit patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, be part of my content council, listen to a bonus weekly episode, and a whole lot more. And join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for Word Nerd Wednesday. If you're watching this on YouTube, please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications. On a podcast app, listen and subscribe there. Follow @Tolkien Times on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.